So you want to know the ins and outs of managing your money. Well, lucky for you, you're just in time for another episode of Master Your Finances with certified financial planner professional Kurt Baker. Kurt and his panel of experts are here for you and will cover topics from a legal and personal standpoint. They'll discuss tax efficiency, liability, owning, managing, and saving your money, and more. Master Your Finances is underwritten in part by Certified Wealth Management and Investment and Rider University. Rider offers continuing studies programs for adults who need flexibility. Want to add new skills to your resume? Take a continuing studies course at Rider University. Now, let's learn how we can better change our habits with Kurt Baker.
Do you want to learn how to raise awareness and improve your mental health and well-being at work and home? Are you interested in strategies for increasing resilience and adaptability? Do you want to know the best practices for encouraging open dialogue about mental wellness and among the workplace employees? Doreen Miri, a psychotherapist and a national board certified and licensed professional counselor in New Jersey, is here to help you understand the importance of your mental health and well-being both personally and professionally, as well as ideas for creating a culture that supports mental health in the workplace. She will also provide you with tools to help you shift your focus to living by choice rather than circumstance. She will help you feel accomplished and confident in your ability to adapt to the changing world. Thank you so much for coming on, Doreen. Changing world is kind of the thing that I heard in there the most at the very end. We've definitely had a changing world lately.
Yes.
So, so how did you get involved? This is a very interesting area because you're a psychotherapist, which is beautiful, and you're dealing with the workplace, which is awesome. So, which is much, much needed. I don't think people underestimate the amount that's needed. So why don't you just give us a little bit of background about what got you to this point in life, so to speak, to become kind of this blended expert here, which is really important in both areas.
Actually, when I began my career years ago, I was actually started out in the pharmaceutical sales, marketing, and training arena and really enjoyed it. And midway through my career, I said, what do I really want to do? What do I really want to be? And I had an opportunity when I was working in pharma to also do training and work with individuals who are put on what we call performance improvement plans, or PIPs. And it was a great opportunity for me to really discern what I really loved doing best, and that was helping people develop both personally and professionally. So I had a couple great experiences when I was working with people on the performance improvement plans and really help them turn things around and actually stay with the company. And as you know, that's challenging. Most of the time when you're put on those plans, you're concerned that you're not going to keep your job. But I work with them both personally and professionally and help them remove some barriers, that they had to succeeding and creating new habits and new behaviors that serve them. And it was a great opportunity. So I decided at that time to go back to school for my master's in community counseling and human services, and then on for my certification to be a licensed psychotherapist and licensed practical professional counselor here in New Jersey. And it was a great opportunity. It was a long haul, doing it part-time
Right.
as I was working, but midway through, what I also decided to do was to shift away from the pharmaceutical industry and take a job that was more aligned with what I was doing. So I did some consulting and worked for organizations that did personality assessments, conflict assessments, etc., and did leadership training and development, and worked for organizations that really help the employee through the entire journey, whether it's assessing, developing, training, career transition and mobility, as well as transitioning outside of an organization. So it was a great opportunity for me to be able to work and use my craft of clinical skills and also my experience in the workplace, dynamics. So it was a great way to marry what I love doing best, which is helping people personally and professionally. And typically in my private practice, I'll see individuals, couples, or families who have challenges usually in change and transition. And talking about change, things are always changing. Nothing stays the same. But as humans, the first, step in looking at change is to resist it for the most part.
Right.
And unless there's a crisis, a lot of people don't invite change, right? So they feel like they're forced to change. So either somebody's lost their job, they've had a relationship challenge, or a financial challenge. And what they typically do and how they deal with it no longer serves them. So they have an opportunity to keep trying the same thing over and over again, or say, how can I use this as an invitation to grow? So what I'll do is when they come in, we'll look at what's the immediate challenge and where does it tie back if we look at where that behavior or habit, where they develop that. We all have a default behavior and we use it until it doesn't work anymore. And those opportunities present as, challenges or changes in our lives. And that's when we can look and reevaluate and look at where our best default behaviors serve us, but also learn where they don't and replace those habits and behaviors with habits and behaviors that help us become more resilient and adapt to the changing environment.
So that's a lot of great information, but I want to make sure we touch on some of this. So after you explained like where you came from, it sounds like you had a lot of experiences with dealing with employees who were essentially struggling, right?
Yes.
A little bit. And so they've essentially been put on notice, look, we've got to figure this out. Otherwise you're just not going to be a fit for our company, and hopefully they can figure it out. So when you were dealing with these different employees, what were, can you give some examples of things that would come up? Like, why do you think an employee was maybe underperforming as far as the corporation was concerned? What types of things did you see that maybe they could work on? Were there some things that, hey, look, I'm having a rough time. Were there external forces affecting them or the internal forces? So I'm just curious, because these things happen to everybody, employer-employee relationships. So what were some of those things that you kind of noticed? And then what did you kind of help them through? I'm just curious, the kinds of things that you saw originally that actually got you into the profession you're in now. What stories can you tell us about that?
Great question. Thanks so much. Because it's actually both the internal, issues and also external issues that are in the workplace. Or, we are who we are in relation to the people we're in relationships with, whether it's personally or professionally. So typically, we look at what are some of those pieces that you can be in control of, right?
Okay.
So one of the things that we're finding now, especially in this post-COVID, world that we live in, is really looking at culture. And when a lot of organizations say they have a collaborative, supportive culture, and really focuses on the mental fitness and cares about the balance, oftentimes what is said is not really what is in actuality or realistic, right?
Right.
So what happens is it challenges that employee and it quiets them down to the point where if they are having stress or anxiety, they might not say it because they're afraid that their employers will think that they won't be able to handle the work. So pieces of it are taking a look at the culture in the organization, right? And are the leaders inspiring change and also focus on mental fitness and mind health? And not just talking about it, because a lot of people talk about it, but it's about elevating the conversation with action.
Right.
So when we talk about culture, I think the question really is, it's not a one-time choice or a declaration, right? It's made up of daily choices, right, that model and show that we care about our employees. So many organizations have, unlimited paid time off. Right. But are the employees encouraged to use it? A lot of research shows no. And then, are the leaders and the C-level encouraging the frontline managers to actually stay close to and monitor, are the roles and responsibilities realistic, right? Are we meeting our goals? Are things realistic? Because leaders need to inspire and lead the conversation. And the managers really need to model the behavior. So top-down leadership is critical, but in regards to determinants of employee satisfaction and wellness, the frontline manager really have the clearest and most direct, line, right? So for instance, if it's paid time off unlimited, when the managers take off, do they have a best practice in place, which means they're totally off and all their urgent emails get sent or requests get sent to, another colleague? Or are they still working when they're off? Because that particular behavior
that's
models.
not time off.
Right, it's not time off, but more importantly, it's letting your employees know that when they're taking time off, they really can't take time off. So I think it goes back to not only what's said, but also what's modeled for people within the workplace, because that adds a particular pressure and stress.
Okay, so you're essentially, what have I heard that? So it's important for the leadership to really follow the direction, and if they're really taking time off, because at least the employers I know, and they're really after productivity, and a lot of productivity comes from a proper balance. I oftentimes equate this to the gym, right? I mean, if you went to the gym and worked out 12 hours a day, that's probably not going to yield you the best results. In fact, they showed with Olympic athletes that they were actually overworking because they were stressing out and having more injuries, and they were actually having more downtime.
Right.
So you have to balance, and that's the same thing with your mental health or your mental wellness as far as productivity goes. You can be productive and actually potentially do that in less time if you're balancing out your mental health with your actual work life. And so how do we measure, do we have ways of measuring, like making sure that they are taking time off? Because you always have these, I think employers have this, that they'll have employees that just will work every day of the week. And it's like, well, that's not good, because that might work for a while, but at some point they're going to hit a wall and they're just going to crash, right? You don't know, it could be 6 months, a year, 2 years. At some point, that is not sustainable. And then you're going to have problems. You have more errors. You're going to have more, of course, they're going to get sick more because they're not resting like they should, things like this. So how do we actually encourage this, kind of philosophy? The leadership, they can lead by example, which sounds like it's a great one. Is there anything else like within the organization, say, hey, here's how we like set this up so that we encourage you to take that time off, and everybody else is going to support you when you need it, right?
Yeah, and the thing is, it's an opportunity for the organization to actually come together, right, and look at what they're doing best. Right. And then identifying what are areas that we can do a little bit better. Okay. And so, employee surveys are important. The thing is, when a survey is given, they need to listen to what, the responses are. Right. And I often tell employers, even if you can't make all the changes that are requested, keep that line of communication open. People want to be heard and acknowledged and recognized, right? So town halls are very important, right? So you can be open with what's going on, and so leaders can also be transparent. Surveys, right, pulse surveys are important as well. Some other things that can be done too is letting the organization know throughout all levels that what the cost is if we don't mind mental fitness in the workplace. Because like you mentioned earlier, a lot of times it'll show up in, people are not as productive. There's absenteeism. There's presenteeism, where people show up, but they really don't, do the work. There's something that was just coined bare minimal Mondays to help people ease into the workplace, right? So the thing is to encourage employees, what is a smart way to work and what works for you? And, when leaders are sending out, messages, one of the things I was just helping a CEO with is make an emotional proofread a habit. What do I mean by that? When you send out, a communication to an employee, feel and look at and have, self as well as social awareness. How is that going to impact them? Is it going to motivate them, or is it going to challenge them? Because I think that's what companies need to look at, is the culture regarding mental health one that is supporting the mental health of your employees or challenging it? And if it's challenging it, then you need to look at some of those key areas as to what can we do better. Are we training and upskilling? When we do promotions, are we setting that person up for success? Do they have the skill sets, the habits to be able to support that role? Are we arming them with what they need, right? Also, do we praise our people and our teams enough? That's important. And again, it's really about having the conversation, modeling it, and actually taking action.
That's fantastic. I mean, it's a lot of great information. We're going to take a quick break. You're listening to Master Your Finances. We'll be right back.
This is Master Your Finances with Kurt Baker, Certified Financial Planner Professional. Learn about tax efficiency, liability, owning, managing, and saving your money, and more from Kurt and his experienced panel of guests. Master Your Finances is underwritten in part by Certified Wealth Management and Investment and Rider University. Rider University offers flexible education for adult learners. For more information, it's rider.edu/nextstep.
Welcome back. You're listening to Master Your Finances. I'm here with Doreen, Miri, and we're talking about how important mental health is in the workplace and how it actually adds to productivity, which is sometimes what employers don't intuitively think. They think, well, if I work more hours, I'm going to get more productivity and I'm going to make more money. Well, that may sound right in a spreadsheet, but that doesn't work with real people, because real people get tired, real people do make mistakes, and real people need to be happy and content in their job. Otherwise, they're just not going to be productive, right? You talked about the Mondays, what'd you call that? I'm going to call it Slack Off Monday, but Ease In Monday, right? Would you call it Ease In Monday or something?
Bare minimal Monday.
Bare minimal Monday.
Yeah.
But that's not necessarily what you want to have as a
Right.
written policy, but recognize that people do go through cycles where sometimes they're really highly productive, other times they're not quite as productive, but as long as they're doing well over time, then I think that's okay as an employer, right? Because we all have biorhythms and all this other stuff going on. So we have to kind of recognize that we all work a little bit differently. And as long as we understand that and we somehow try to incorporate that into the culture, which is part of what you're talking about, the culture is really important to be kind of including all different ways that people like to work and helping them to find the mean between how you work and what needs to get done at the company. And if you can kind of blend that, I think they're both going to be pretty happy, right?
Yeah, and that's really, and that's where the magic happens.
Right.
Because the workplace wins and the employee wins,
right?
Because 2 out of 3 Americans actually say that their place of work causes them the most anxiety or stress, right? We mentioned that, depression is the #1 disability in the workplace, eclipsing heart disease, cancer, and respiratory diseases combined. We see more and more people leaving the workplace because of mental health challenges. As a matter of fact, 50% of millennials and 75% of Gen Zers are leaving the workplace because of mental health issues. So ways that we can look at attracting and retaining top talent is to really focus on how do we support mind health and have mentally fit employees. And in addition to just, paying for some gym memberships and apps, how can we create that culture? And what we're seeing with the absenteeism, the presenteeism, and even the bare minimal Mondays, people are fashioning a response to the overwhelm and
Right.
the unrealistic expectations that they're sometimes faced with. So the organizations that are really winning out are the ones that are looking at and listening to what their employees actually need. And it's different for everybody. We all
Right.
have innate drivers, right? So it's really, paramount that, the C-level leaders allow their managers, right, and frontline managers and supervisors as well, to report in on what are some of the trends that they're seeing within, their teams and their workplaces. What are some of the needs? And the biggest thing is really just listening to what employees are asking, right?
Right.
And looking for some freedom so they can work to be most productive. And that is different for everybody, right? And it's creating that balance. And now with the hybrid workforce, there's so many opportunities and options to do that. So, and the other thing too is for employers to really be a touchstone to their employees, to have those open conversations. I just met with a small retail organization, and they have one-on-ones. VPs have one-on-ones with their direct reports, and also some of the entry-level, employees as well. And they tell them in those, sessions, listen, this could be about work, it could be about you, it could be personal, it could be, talking about the weather. They want access to their employees to see how they're doing and what they can do better as an employer to support them and to make them feel more mentally fit. Because the more engaged they are as a result of having, great mind health, the more productive,
Right.
and the better return on investment for the organization.
And I like the one-on-one because one of the things that I've kind of learned is that on the one-on-ones, it's good to get. Sometimes people think it's like a top-down conversation, but if it's a two-way conversation where the employer is asking the employee what they think they can do better, then you're kind of, it's a little bit more disarming. Then they're going to say, well, here's what I can do better, right? So if you almost start the conversation
Yes.
backwards, I want to sit down with you and see what you think about what's going on. How am I doing at my job? What do you think about what I'm doing and how I'm implementing as a leader?
Right.
I want to be the best possible leader I can be for you and your team or whatever the case may be. So if you kind of start off it's kind of like you take that first step and then maybe then it'll be a lot less intimidating if you come back and say, well, here's some things that I've noticed, and maybe what do you think about this situation, and how can we kind of improve on that, whatever the circumstance might be, whatever their concerns are, things they're seeing, good and bad. So usually start off with the good.
Yeah.
These are the things I like about what you're doing, and here's all the good stuff. But here's a couple things I think we can work on. So if you both kind of start off with the positive, and I think the leader needs to start that conversation. And be willing to take the criticism. That's the other part I think that's critical. That's really, really tough because people take criticism personally when it should be, you have to put that in a box by itself and say, this is a professional critique. This
Right.
is trying to help you to become better. Please don't take this personally because none of us is perfect. and that'll never happen. And so we just need to try to each incrementally just improve a little bit. And I think that's the other thing is like pacing this. Like, I don't want you to do 20 things at once.
Right.
Let's work on one thing, maybe two, and just work on a little bit at a time. And that way they're not going to feel overwhelmed, and you're not going to feel overwhelmed because they may tell you things you don't want to hear either as an employer, right?
Yeah, all good points. It must be great to work for you. So I'm going to send a lot of people
all
your
right,
way.
okay.
Right? No,
Okay,
but all aside, I appreciate that because it's the leader is modeling and also being vulnerable, right? So they're
Right.
asking, hey, listen, what are some things I'm doing well, but what are some things I need to work on?
Right.
I know I'm not perfect. So again, the leader showing vulnerability. Vulnerability, really, research shows, is one of the strongest skills in leadership because it helps connect and it helps that other person know, yeah, we're not perfect. And thankfully, we're not because we need, as long as we're here, we have a choice to grow.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So, and the longer we're here, the more we grow, and so much better than the alternative. So it's about that, creating that vulnerability and creating that conversation. And the other thing too is, it's not just about saying great project and waiting till it's completed, but celebrate those milestones along
Right.
the way. Because to your point earlier, it's too overwhelming sometimes when people go into these conversations because they just look at, here's my successes, here's why I haven't made my number, and let me go on the defense. And it doesn't create,
Right.
a two-way opportunity. I just had a situation working with a leader because they're delivering performance evaluations. A lot of talk about, are they positive, are they negative, should we continue to do this?
Right.
But they think that, the organization that I was working with thought, it's positive that we do these. And in a way it is, however, the way it was presented was challenging because they go to a 1 through 5 Likert scale.
Right.
And unfortunately what was happening is, they were getting, messaging from HR and top leadership. They needed 80% to be within that 3 or 4 range, right?
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So the challenge with that is it actually, for some leaders, that was part of the challenge. The leaders felt that they had to, they were in a corner to make sure if they had 10 people, 8 out of those 10 people had to be a 3. They didn't have that flexibility to give that a 4.
So can you explain how that scale works and what that actually like?
So
for those who aren't familiar with it.
number 1 would be needs improvement,
Okay.
right? Number 2, 1 would be you're just approaching a performance improvement
Okay.
plan, and then 2, needs improvement. 3, you're meeting,
Okay.
and then 5, you're a little bit better, and then 4 and 5, no changes necessary, right?
Okay.
You're hitting the mark on all your numbers.
Right.
The challenge has been that a lot of people have just experienced in this organization change in leadership. So what was happening is somebody was coming in looking at the prior year,
Right.
and that person just completed that and they checked all the boxes, but the new leader said, well, I want you to have something to strive for, so I'm going to give you a 4 instead of a 5. So that wasn't very motivating.
Oh, okay.
So what happened
Understood.
is, those individuals walk around and what they'll say is, okay, I'll give you a 4. So it's not always motivating. It's how
Right.
it's presented. So, a suggestion would be to say, here's how I see you met,
Right.
all those parameters. And you did a stellar job. Here's one area where there's some room for improvement.
Mm-hmm.
And when we see that, that's going to be a 5 next time around. So in other words, it's also how it's presented and what the messaging is. Because the messaging could be either, I'm going to give you a 4, and then that individual will show up as a 4 versus, hey, you're just about there. Let me help and support you to get to that 5.
Yeah, I think what you're pointing out to me is, at least what I'm hearing, is that it's important for the leaders to set clear goals and objectives and benchmarks on what we're trying to accomplish, and that way you can better decide how they're going to rate within that. Because if you're not clear on what you want somebody to do, whether that's the person answering the phone or that's somebody in charge of your financial
Mm-hmm.
information or whatever the case may be, or your sales, it's going to be hard for everybody to kind of be on the same page. Another thing I just read, recently, Ray Dalio, who wrote Principles,
Yes.
he wrote in there how he keeps an error log, and this was after one of his traders made a huge error and forgot to make a trade, and it cost the company quite a bit of money. But instead of firing the person, what he did is he took it as a learning experience, and now he actually documents the errors, and you actually get in more trouble at his company for not reporting the error than you do for the error itself, which I think was a key component to his success. Is that like, because if you start criticizing the errors and firing people for errors, you're not going to have employees left by the end of the year, because we're all going to make mistakes by the end of the year. But I think it was very important to make it an open dialogue about, okay, well, now let's talk about the process. What led to this error? And now how can we mitigate that? In his case, he said, well, let's just start documenting and let's decide, well, how did this one happen? And then the next time one happens, okay, well, how does this one happen? And the long-term errors have gone way, 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 way down. The most minuscule levels, because he was way open about it, probably more so than any other company had been at the time.
Right.
And that's counterintuitive. Oh, no, you don't want to talk about errors. That just costs us a whole bunch of money. But in his case, he said, well, let's talk about it, right? Because somebody's going to find out about it sooner or later, because we're going to go bankrupt or we're going to solve it one way or the other, right? So I thought that was very insightful that he did that. So
yeah, very insightful. And thanks for sharing that, because he had the right motivation, right? So he was learning and winning, wanting to hear. So he's looking at what could we learn. So looking at the learning, not the losses. And that's really a big thing for people too.
Absolutely. Well, we're going to take another quick break. You're listening to Master Your Finances.
This is Master Your Finances with Kurt Baker, Certified Financial Planner Professional. Learn about tax efficiency, liability, owning, managing, and saving your money, and more from Kurt and his experienced panel of guests. Master Your Finances is underwritten in part by Certified Wealth Management and Investment and Rider University. Rider University offers flexible education for adult learners. For more information, it's rider.edu/nextstep.
Welcome back. You're listening to Master Your Finances. I'm here with Doreen and Miri, and we're talking about the importance of good mental health in the workplace. And you've given a lot of great examples of ways that we can improve it: surveying the employees, giving feedback, talking to leadership, having leadership talk to employees, kind of figure out really how everybody's feeling. And sometimes they're a little bit uncomfortable because you get things come up that maybe you don't want to hear. So you have to kind of go in with the right attitude. And as I said before, I think it's better that the leaders kind of start that conversation off positive first, and then you can move into the, here's the things we need to work on. And I think setting clear goals and objectives that kind of lowers the stress level a little bit. It might raise it in one way, but it lowers it in another. At least you kind of know what is expected, which I think people appreciate. Like, define what you want me to do as clearly as you can. That way I know exactly what I'm trying to do. So anyway, so what else should we be doing out there in the workplace? I know there's a lot going on since the whole COVID thing and people working from home and all this other fun stuff.
Yeah, there's a lot of different trends, right? We have organizations that are demanding people come back into the office, full weeks, partial weeks. We are having hybrid. And some of the challenges that are occurring is, it's twofold. So one, the organizations, rightfully so, want to create more of that social support and environment for their employees, right? And a leader recently said, I want to go back to the way it was. And one of the things that, I said to him was, you don't want to go back to the way it was. You want it to be better than the way it was. And I think that's a lot of what people are struggling with is, well, let's go back to the way it was. It's about how can we create something better, right? So the things that were working, in our work environment prior to the pandemic, let's continue those. But there was a lot that wasn't working. And I think what the pandemic did, it just shone a brighter light on that. It also gave some autonomy, to people that were asking for more of a hybrid work, opportunity as well. So again, going back and asking the employees, what is it you need? What is it you want? Because it's different for everyone. Now, for some people, and again, it depends on the generation. It depends on the person's responsibilities, where they are, and who they are, just in general, right? Because people are different on how they process things and make decisions. So, you can't satisfy everybody, but what you want to do is see what you can create so there's a balance of that. So the organizations that have been doing very well are the ones that say, listen, our doors are open 5 days a week, right?
Right.
Come in when you want to come in, work from home when you want to work from home. And once a month, some of them are doing it once a quarter, and they're having people come into the office, not to really concentrate on work, but to concentrate on each other and to kind of grow the relationships. And for people to get to know each other a bit too, because there's change in leadership, they're changing teams, but also to find out what it is they want, what it is they need. And as they look at the next 6 months or 12 months, what do we want to create together? It's really asking the employees to also be part of developing what their workplace and workforce will look like. And those organizations are having the most success because they're partnering with their employees. And then what we're starting to see is those employees are coming in a little bit more, right?
Right.
And then one of the things we want to be mindful of is if some people can't come in, why is that? Some people, have been struggling and, they've had to change their family system, whether it be they have their parents living with them, their adult children, or just having, a child. So they like that flexibility of being able to be home and be present to some of those other responsibilities, as well as their job responsibilities. And one of the things COVID did bring us, it did show us that we were able to do business even at a global scale without some of the travel, right, to those far off places, and even without the travel to the office. So we can't erase the fact that we were quite productive, and effective and successful outside of the office. So it's really about looking at, how do we create a balance? And depending on the workforce and the industry, it's a little bit different. So it's about being mindful and open.
Yeah,
Is that helpful?
Oh, it's very helpful because I mean these are the conversations I hear, because I hear about, like, I'll put myself in this category. The old timers been around, used to go into work every day, right? And then your younger employees that are used to being on electronic devices, they can do everything remotely on their phone essentially, right. and I don't necessarily want to do that. But we found out there's benefits to both. And one of the things I remember employers saying to me is like, well, I have employees that want to be hired and they want to work completely virtual. And they're like, well, how are you ever going to get promoted if you don't ever know any of the management, right? You have to have the interpersonal skills. Right. And so I think balance is key. And I agree that there's a lot. And what I found is I have more contact with people now, because now it's like, hey, I don't have time to come visit in the office. We don't have time to get together in the office, but we can do a quick meeting on Zoom or whatever, right? So if you use that communication component as a way to just add additional ways in case you can't get together. But I still say, and I think you're saying this, is that you do need to have time where we get together and we talk as people, even if it's mainly social, because you have to know on a personal level who you're working with, not just on a skill, because skills and your personality and your skills meet. They're all the same thing. So if you don't understand the personal side of somebody's skill set, it's hard to understand the skill set itself and exactly what they can and can't do, and how you can press. So I think that sometimes employers miss that because they look at them like numbers, and here's the actuarial side of that, which is fine. But you also have to look at the the left and the right side of the brain, so to speak. You got to look at the creative side and how they need this time. Maybe some people work, like I know I work better like high, really intensive things. I have to have quiet, and I have to be, I can't have a lot of distractions. Other people could do that just fine with distractions. I can't. I just know me. And so we have to understand that everybody works, because they did the open office thing for a while. I know some employers found out that wasn't a good idea for everybody. Some it worked for, but some it was a nightmare. Right. And I need my office closed, quiet. If you want to make phone calls and call people, I need it to be quiet, right? So I guess we're learning about, and I think the key back is one thing you said, we're surveying them and you're having them involved in the solution. I heard you say that too, right? Yeah. So this has to be kind of a collaborative process, is what it sounds like to me.
Yeah, and and it goes back to the culture when they say collaborative, supportive, and what are you modeling?
Right.
And if the employees are giving feedback and leadership and management are listening, that's great. That's creating more engagement, right? More connectivity, with each other. And when people feel connected, they want to show up more, and they're motivated to do their best work. And that's really what, the work that I do is all about, is helping people be their better selves and be optimal at what they do. Because, work is, a great audience for that, because we spend over a third of our life, at work, right? So employers have a great opportunity to really support the mind health of an individual that they're going to get a return on investment for. I think the newest statistic is for every $1 that an organization spends on the support of mental health for their employees, they receive $4 back in return. So, some of the things we're talking about go under, what's, really I'm passionate about, which is preventative versus, last response, right? So first response versus last response. And creating these cultures that are collaborative and that include the employees, which they should. They're the largest, investment, human capital.
Absolutely. Yeah. And two things I heard in here which were awesome. One is, and this just reminded me of like the kids when they're in kindergarten, even the kids who were in the pandemic, they're like, I want to go to school because I want to see my friends. Yeah. They were, quote, working, but there's a social aspect to going to work. And if you create an environment where people actually want to go to work and be with the people that they work with, that should be a goal of every employer. You want to make it so they want to come into work, because if they want to come into work, they can obviously be more productive. They might even stay longer because they just like it. They're having fun, right? They're getting stuff done, but they're having fun. And the other thing I heard was the return on investment, which of course in my world that's a great thing. $4 to 1 is a great return on investment, probably considered high risk, speculative stock, so to speak. But now we're talking people and we're talking real returns that you can actually document. So one of the things that I always see as a struggle with anybody that's kind of trying to work in this area, because I remember when mental health exceeded physical health as far as the expense on the medical side several years ago, how do you get the employer to understand that if I spend a couple of dollars now, I'm going to get this huge return? Because they don't see it. It's not like, somebody breaks their leg, you let them go out for a couple of weeks, they come back, they're back on the job, right? If somebody's having issues with a mental health thing, how do I make sure their mental health is balanced so they're being more productive? It's harder to see that. So what are some suggestions you have so that to get employers to understand just how this works and how it is a real number and it is documented, but not every employer really kind of can see this?
Yeah, and great question. And, again, when it comes to business, if it can't be measured, then it's not happening.
Right.
But anecdotally, we've known for years, right, that joyful, happy people that are well, that are engaged, are more motivated, and they show up better, right? To themselves, to work, to their families, to their communities. So it's interesting, we had to wait for, statistics to actually support what we knew. But in the world we're in, that's important.
Right.
And that's where the $1 investment, which equals 4, in regards to your human capital, is really important. So, one of the things that's important to do in working with organizations is making sure you have buy-in from leadership, CFO, HR, training development, benefits. It's a way to be able to bring every piece and every layer of the organization together so they can understand and also share their budgets as well, how it's impacting their role and their people, right? So because mind health shows up in different ways, right? If people have a chronic illness, depression will probably follow, right? If people aren't doing well at work or feel overwhelmed, depression, anxiety, or stress, will follow. So, and then presenteeism, they show up there, but they're really not there. Or absenteeism. Right. We see an increase now, too, of, a lot of people taking short-term disability for anxiety and stress-related, challenges. So it's letting them know this is what it's costing them. So if you wait until everybody gets to the point where they do need your employee assistance program, or they do need to go to a rehabilitation center, then as they were struggling on their way to those, those destinations, if you would have helped them with preventative measures, right, such as, the open door policy, such as therapy, on-site, coaching on-site, I've done that work as well, where people might be struggling in the moment, right? We could also do it virtually, having conflict with their leaders, team challenges, could be safety issues, substance abuse issues, all those pieces you can begin to alleviate or certainly lessen if you look at a way to support people's mind health and also building resilience in the workplace. People fall down, they have to continue to get back up. Are you giving them the tools and the time to be able to do that? Can they adapt? So it's about the employers adapting and also the employees by having a voice and setting boundaries.
That is key, giving the employees a voice. We're going to take another quick break. You're listening to Master Your Finances.
This is Master Your Finances with Kurt Baker, Certified Financial Planner Professional. Learn about tax efficiency, liability, owning, managing, and saving your money, and more from Kurt and his experienced panel of guests. Master Your Finances is underwritten in part by Certified Wealth Management and Investment and Rider University. Rider University offers flexible education for adult learners. For more information, it's rider.edu/nextstep.
Welcome back. You're listening to Master Your Finance. I'm here with Doreen Miri, and we're talking about the importance of mental health in the workspace. And so I think you get a lot of the good basic information of policies and so forth, but one of the things we've seen in the last couple of years, of course, is this transition back from being secluded and being isolated and things like that. And I know our nonprofit does a lot in the school base, and we saw a lot of school refusal. Kids just didn't want to come back. They were terrified of going back into a group environment with other children. And I know this has been happening to some extent in the employment space as well. I mean, when you isolate people for a long period of time, your social skills diminish because these are things that you have to exercise, just like everything else. You have to exercise social skills. And so, what are you seeing in the workplace, and how do you see, the best practices? How we get people kind of back on track? Because I'm sure everybody is in a different place. Like, I'm back, no problem, and I need a lot of support. And then the person's back, no problem, is like, well, why does this person need so much support? Let's just get back to work. Now I've got to do their work too. I mean, I can just kind of see the dynamics of people in an actual real workspace, like having a little bit of animosity towards where everybody else might be, depending on where you are on that scale, right?
No, absolutely. It's been interesting transition, for many people, and different because, we've had people at home for quite some time, working hybrid, some as little as 6 months, some up to 2 years, right, before they can figure out what they were doing. So different and new habits develop. Not all of them were positive, right? So, being sequestered and being alone, in your cubicle, in your space, at home. Some people didn't have home offices and had to create, makeshift offices, within their closets and different places.
Right. The little kids are running around.
No, yeah.
Dogs are barking.
Exactly. I was just on a Zoom the other day, right. And, there were 2 other people, and their dogs got to know each other through the pandemic, just, barking at each other. So now they bring them on every.
Oh, that's really interesting. So they're socializing.
Exactly. They're socializing. Okay. So it's challenging because what we really do need is connection and social interaction. I mean, that's really the key to, having, longevity. That's one of the key pieces now that they're looking at. So, but what's happened is those habits and behaviors that developed, really closed people off from, who they were and work with professionally, and even personally, some people don't go out as much anymore. So one of the things we're finding too, even with adults going back, is an increase in social anxiety. Some, it shows up as fear that they don't want to travel into cities. Some people are still afraid of not getting sick. They're afraid of, catching, other viral infections, not just COVID, and bringing it home. So we see a heightened sensitivity of that, which is understandable. And then we have people that just have the social anxiety of afraid to re-enter. Right? They feel they've lost some of their skills, some insecurity and self-esteem, issues, because they've been able to have a barrier with Zoom for so long. So, the full person, figuratively and literally, right, doesn't show up, when you're in a Zoom meeting. So the re-entry, has a lot of different pieces to it. And that's something that I encourage leaders and managers to pay attention to too, is just to ask, hey, listen, what are your thoughts on coming back, into the office? What's your situation? What would be helpful for you? How can we support you to get you to come in? If you can't, let's understand why. And what are some services that are out there to help you maybe build some of that resilience and adaptability? Because at the end of the day, like I said, we need more connection, and people are becoming divided. And then we're seeing that a little bit with employers and employees. Talk about division. If they feel the employees are not jumping onto, you need to come back to the office mandate, that creates, a disparity. And there's no understanding that goes on unless there's a conversation. I always say, absent of a conversation, nothing happens. So what we really want to do is have the conversations we're having in our minds out loud with ourselves and with others. And I encourage that, whether it's in a personal relationship or professional relationship, within reason, because employers don't know what they don't know. Some of the, motivated and progressive employers ask those questions. Some don't, because they don't want to hear it. So there's nothing wrong with telling your managers or your leaders, or sending in through a survey, that you want to be, you want your words and your needs to be incorporated in, right? And you want to be recognized, not just for your projects, but for who you are as a person. And the more that the company invests in that person, the more they're going to get out of them in regards to their work and productivity, and more important, loyalty. And we don't have a lot of workplace loyalty. And that's one of the changes, we see with some of the generations in the workplace, because things are changing.
Well, I think loyalty is huge. I mean, we kind of, those of us a little bit older, take it almost for granted, even though we've lived through the cyclical thing ourselves a little bit. But I mean, years ago, our parents, they worked for the same company for 30, 40 years, and that was the end of it, right? They didn't really think you went to work for ABC, and that was the end of it, right? But now there's much more of a mobile workforce, because you can move around. I mean, your retirement's mobile, everything's mobile, and so it just makes it a lot easier to move. But I think adding all these components adds to the employee the satisfaction, and then you reduce the employee turnover rate.
Correct.
Which sometimes employers really underestimate that cost. They think, oh well, we just put them in another training thing for 6 weeks, whatever.
Yeah.
But it's not just the 6 weeks. It's the integration. It's the institutional knowledge. It's the relationships they develop. And if you start adding all of those up, you're talking it takes 2, 3, 4 years to really get a new employee in, and so you've lost like 2 to 3 years worth of salary on that employee, and you don't realize it. You're not realizing it. It's coming from somewhere else. You don't actually notice that it's coming directly from that one employee that you had to replace.
Exactly. Turnover costs could be anywhere from 2.5% to 5%, depending on the position, of that person's salary each time there's a turnover.
Right.
So again, you want people that are engaged. You want to attract and retain the top talent, of which you want to reduce turnover because it costs money. So employers have to really look at, are we attracting employees and are we developing them? What is our culture, or is it more of a churn and burn environment?
Right.
So some organizations are set that way, and again, it's about really having people understand what culture they're walking into, and more people are looking at what culture am I joining versus what person or what company. And the highest piece of that culture is their mind health. In that culture, and do they actually practice it? Because more and more we're looking at that's a determining factor of somebody saying, yes, I want to work for company A or company B. It's how do they treat their people, right?
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. And so as an employer, you're like, okay, I'm putting everything in place. I'm doing all these great things. So what are some of the ways that I can let everybody else know that, hey, this is our culture here, and we'd like for you to join us? I know one is you ask employees to like refer other employees in, those kinds of things. So when that and you give them some kind of reward for like bringing them in, because you don't have to pay anybody else, right? So you can like give them some kind of a help. So we want to make sure that the world at large knows that, hey, this is kind of our culture, and it gets out, good and bad, right? Because you hear about bad. Sometimes employers say, well, that just one off, but people talk a lot, especially when you're in an industry. They don't realize that your employee came from an industry, and that industry communicates with itself, regardless
Small
whether it's a government industry or a small business, 1 or 2 people. It doesn't matter. People talk. And I think sometimes we need to recognize that how you set the tone really does have long-term impact. Even if you're not seeing it, people just won't apply. Yeah. Right? You're just not going to get the opportunity to talk to that person because they want nothing to do with your company.
Right. It's company branding.
Right.
And I've worked with people who have said no to a lot of top name employers because of having that, intel, inside intelligence on what's going on, behind the scenes. So that's another thing we really try to hone in on with organizations is, there's Glassdoor, and there's a wealth of other ways, to learn about what's going on, inside. And then when people leave organizations, right, there's a lot of startups that people have been leaving in particular industries, and people are sharing what their experience has been about. So prospective top talent, employee is not going to be interested. So you really have to look at, how you take care of your people and keep them mentally fit, and actually practice that in your culture as a branding tactic.
Right.
And when you do those right things, the word will get out. And also, you actually hold town halls and you talk about it.
Right. I think that's
you're
the
not
key.
afraid to
Talk
answer,
about it.
Yeah, you're not afraid to answer questions. And a lot of organizations, can put that also too on their social media or website or press. And it's not just how are they treating the employees, but how do they treat their clients and their customers?
Right.
Those are all pieces of an employer's branding. And a lot can be, told about that in regards to how they support their people.
You reminded me of an old saying. They say the customer is always right, but they say, why don't you, because if the employee is not doing well, then they're not going to make a customer happy. I'm kind of twisting it a little bit, but it's like the customer's not going to be happy unless the employees are happy, because they're going to reflect the nature of the company. So if they're miserable at work, your customer service representative is not necessarily going to treat your customer that well if they don't feel like they're being treated well, right? So you have to it kind of like flows, right? So don't expect them to be happy if you're not being nice to them, basically.
Because it dulls their passion, right?
Right.
I often tell people that I coach, it's your integrity when you go out,
Right,
right? So
correct.
that's really what you're fronting with. However, over a period of time, people's resilience wears down.
Right.
So their passion, is diminished if they're not working for an organization they don't think is supporting them. So you're right, in one way or another, that's going to show up.
Correct.
And it also doesn't make the person feel good. And that's why we see more people leaving jobs because they don't want to be there.
And they're not going to stay there. So
Yeah.
as far as we're going to wrap up right now, so any last words before we wrap up?
I just want to say thanks so much for having me on today. It was a great conversation, and anytime I have the opportunity to increase the awareness and elevate the conversation of mental health in the workplace, I welcome that. And just want to wish everyone stay well, stay productive, and stay engaged.
Well, thank you, Doreen. We appreciate you coming on. You listen to Master Your Finance. Have a wonderful day.
That was this week's episode of Master Your Finances with Kurt Baker, Certified Financial Planner Professional. Tune in every Sunday at 9 a.m. to expand your knowledge in building and managing your wealth. Missed an episode? No worries. You can subscribe to a free weekly episode of Master Your Finances to listen to on your favorite podcasting platform. Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts, whatever. Master Your Finances is underwritten in part by Certified Wealth Management and Investment and Rider University. Rider offers continuing studies programs for adults who need flexibility. Want to add new skills to your resume? Take a continuing studies course at Rider University.